Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and if you're wondering, I've been doing a series of videos where I've been rewatching and either making a brand new review or re-reviewing each Star Wars film depending on if I had reviewed them previously or not. Well, I've finished all three prequel films, so it's time to take a look at them together. Now, I do want to real quickly address that Solo Star Wars story, while being a prequel, doesn't fit into the stories of the prequel trilogy, so I'm not showing it there. And the animated film for the Star Wars The Clone Wars, which did actually get a theatrical, though limited, release, won't also be included in here, though I did consider including it, but I decided that is going to be best served by being its own separate thing, so that's going to be the week after this video, so stay tuned. But in the meantime, let's first recap each individual film and my thoughts on them before I discuss them as a unit. And might as well start with Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So to begin with, let's address probably the elephant in the room. Most people rank The Phantom Menace as the worst Star Wars film. Well, people didn't until they decided just to hate on whatever the newest film is going to be, which I definitely think is a thing that they do, but we're going to talk about The Phantom Menace is typically considered one of the lowest films. But actually, what I'm going to be doing next week is what I consider the worst of the prequel trilogy and probably my least favorite Star Wars film overall. But with that said, I do understand where they're coming from. Some of the CGI I think doesn't hold up very well. And Georgia, well, his future appearances in the Clone Wars and Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and external in other media like books and that, I think portray him much better. The Clone Wars still lean into more of his goofy and clumsiness like the Phantom Menace did, but it seems like they did a better job at conveying that to us, the audience, and making it feel more endearing than annoying. Jar Jar, I can understand why rewatching this film, like, yeah, some of his clumsiness gets over the top and it gets repetitive. So eventually comes to a point where you're just rolling your eyes at it because it's not really funny slapstick humor anymore. Also, I can't believe they did a fart joke in this movie. I did not remember that. I must have been blocking it out. I hate those kinds of jokes because they're low-hanging fruit, to put it easily. But with all that said, there's another factor that I think a lot of people complain about with the Phantom Menace. The fact that it is set so far off in terms of time jump-wise from Attack of the Clones. And you know what? That is somewhat valid. I don't think it's that much of a problem because it doesn't really impact the story, but, you know, maybe if it was done differently, you know, age Anakin up from 9 to like 11 or 12, and the jump would have been about the same as the jump between the first movie, which I don't know why I was blaming there, but between Episode 4 and Episode 5, which was about a 3-year jump. Aging Anakin up 2 years would make the jump about the same. And actually, I do kind of wish Ankin was a bit older so that way him and Padmé a bit closer in age. But with something like a 5-year age difference, and I don't think Padmé started having any feelings toward Anakin until later in life, but we'll talk about that in the next film. But with all that said, I still think The Phantom Menace is actually a pretty decent film. It's enjoyable. Yes, there's some of the humor doesn't hold up that well, but I think the drama does pretty good. Suspense, action, all that stuff I think holds up pretty good, minus some of poorly aged special effects. And by the way, there's a lot more practical effects than computer effects in this film than a lot of people remember. Just wanted to point that out though. But I really do want to convey that it's the comedy in this film that doesn't hold up well. Okay, lots of people still laugh at fart jokes, and I just don't like party humor. I just don't. It's not for me. But it's all in the humor is where this film falls, not in anything else. Drama, suspense, like I mentioned, action, all do a really good job. I also love some of the parallels as well between this film and the other Star Wars films. Like, for example, in the ending scene, you know, we get to see Anakin, then we see R2, then we cut to to Padmé, and she smiles just like Leia smiled after the scene in Star Wars: A New Hope, in the celebration scene where, all of our main characters look over at R2 and C-3PO. Like, there's some callback there as well. That's just a neat little touch there that I really appreciate that they did. I picked it up this time because I hadn't picked it up before. But it's that subtle thing that I just really like. Another subtle thing is one of the speeders in Mos Espa looks almost identical to Luke's speeder, just with a different paint job. It's a fun little Easter egg though, no bearing on the story, but it is fun. But let's actually discuss what I really like about the film. The sound design. That's often some of the best stuff, especially with the music and all that. Duel of the Fates, of course, is very spectacular. It provides a perfect backdrop to the duel between Anakin and Qui-Gon. I don't know what I was doing there. Between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul. And intercut with the scenes of the Battle of Naboo. I honestly think it's very well done. I remember with it was one of the looks, special looks from after the Mandalorian, I think it was, I think some behind the scenes look on Disney Plus where Filoni gets his take on Duel of the Fates and how it's basically the outcome of that fate determined the direction that Anakin's life would go. Does Obi-Wan survive or does Qui-Gon survive? And you could, I think, make the sound argument that Qui-Gon probably would have been able to steal Anakin away from the dark side because, if nothing else, even if Obi-Wan still trained him, because Qui-Gon would be that father figure in Anakin's life that Anakin needed. He would not have been going to Palpatine to get that father figure. And notice too, may I mention how literally Palpatine tells Anakin that he'll watch his career with great interest. Like, you don't say that to a child, Sheev. You just don't. I fully like the parallels where basically Palpatine's grooming Anakin to become a Darksider. I think that fits very well with his evilness and all of that. But, like, you don't say that. And I do think Anakin missing his mother. Obi-Wan was more his brother. Literally, that's reinforced in Revenge of the Sith. We'll get there eventually in the Clone Wars as well. So Anakin never really had a parental figure. He loses his mother, then he loses his mother in the next film. And a father figure was provided for him by Palpatine that Palpatine decided to take advantage of. Qui-Gon could have been that father figure for him. And that's how I look at that. You may have different interpretations, but Duel of the Fates is literally Duel of Anakin's fate. Plus, just the entire track alone is entirely stunning. John Williams has so many great Star Wars scores, and honestly, some of the best things about all the Star Wars films is John Williams' music, and this film is no different. There's other small things to discuss as well, but I think I'll conclude the review with that this film, I think a lot of people don't give it a fair chance. That the comedy, the humor that surrounds Jar Jar Binks and the admittedly poor writing thereof to color their view of the rest of the film. Jar Jar stuff, besides connecting up with the Gungans, does not really have a large impact on the plot. He's not yet a character that's affecting decisions, and all that because of who he is as a character. A Gungan just reconning and bringing the Jedi to the Gungans would have done the exact same thing in terms of plot, and could have still come to the Jedi because, this Trade Federation stuff could be problematic. I better keep my eye on it. They could have done that and it would have worked. Jar Jar is now relevant to the plot as who he is as a character into the next film. And I bring that up just to show that Jar Jar in this film, people judge him and then judge the film because of him, and not actually look at the film beyond Jar Jar. And I want to ask you guys to consider that as well. But let's actually talk about Attack of the Clones. So for me, this is actually probably my least favorite Star Wars film as a whole, and definitely my least favorite in the prequel trilogy. Part of that is because there are so many red flags about Anakin shown in this film. I'm like, how come Padmé is totally fine with that. This very smart senator, totally fine. Is it really that she thinks I can fix him? Because that's the only thing that makes sense. And red flags. Murdering a bunch of Tusken Raiders. Staring at her. Okay, being awkward itself is not a red flag. But when you're, awkward and staring, even after she says, you're making me uncomfortable, and just a bunch of other stuff, it's like, how do you fall in love? It's like, I feel like the movie should have done a better job at portraying Anakin's positive qualities. Like, there's a scene where, they had pretty much just recently re-met, and here he is complaining about Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's very immature. There's another scene, too, where basically Anakin, however, is basically saying that he doesn't mind the dictatorship. And I feel like that should also be a red flag as well. But no, it's not. And that's my biggest problem is I don't see how Padmé would be interested in Anakin. I do get the other way around totally, but not that way. One, Anakin is portrayed as a young teenager, not an 18, 19-year-old as he actually is. And I do think their age gap should have been a bit closer. But that goes back to just my whole thing with there was a 5-year gap when they first met, and now a 5-year gap would be semi-okay. But again, I feel like some of this stuff could have been portrayed a lot better and in a way that would have made it much more understandable. In fact, that's what I really like about the Clone Wars as a show, was because you get to see why they, are actually into each other. And yes, they also show why eventually the relationship does, essentially fall apart. But I feel like here, George Lucas could have laid the groundwork for all that a little bit better. He done the perfect groundwork for showing why, Anakin is not really a great person in the long run, but not good enough in terms of setting up why Padmé would be interested in such a person, besides the I can fix him mentality. But besides that, the rest of the film is actually pretty solid. There's some cut scenes that I kind of wish they included, such as Obi-Wan going to the droids in the temple to try to identify the Camino and Saber Dot, because as it is now, he just goes straight to Dexter Jester and says the droids couldn't say anything. And I feel like, not so great there, but hey, it still flows. What we'll need is told to us, but I do kind of like, more show versus tell in my storytelling. And as a part of that too, there's also a cutscene where basically Obi-Wan is briefly reflecting on Count Dooku, which I think would have been a great way to give maybe more insight into his character. But I can tell you one thing I really love though, is the fact that when Obi-Wan goes to Master Yoda about not being able to find Camino, Yoda's teaching a class and he says, lost a parent Obi-Wan has, or it might be Master Kenobi, but how embarrassing. And I just love that. That mischievous side of Yoda that we really got to see a little bit in Empire Strikes Back, and I just love it when that comes to be shown on the screen. Just reminds us about that, and I love that. Also, can I say something? Everyone in the Order knows what's going on between Ankin and Padmé. I know this is a common headcanon, people like doing comics and YouTube videos making fun of that, but come on. Literally in this film, after the duel with Count Dooku, Padmé runs up to Anakin and gives him a kiss with Obi-Wan and Yoda standing right there and a bunch of clones. Yes, the clones are probably not gossiping yet at this point, but come on, they will be gossiping. Everyone will know by the end of the war. I'm just saying. But there's several other things we can discuss. Small things here and there, but overall, I don't mind the film. It's just my least favorite because of how uncomfortable the romance is. And yes, there should be some uncomfortableness, but I feel like there's not enough positiveness in that to properly show why Anakin and Padmé got together. Padmé is portrayed as mature, as a go-getter. Like literally, there's a scene where her security basically says, I'm not worried about Anakin, I'm worried about the senator doing something reckless. But the thing is while it could be reckless what some of the stuff Padmé does, she's mature. Basically basically her security is being overly worried. But with Anakin, he is immature. He'll make mistakes, do courses of action based solely on how he feels in the moment, and he won't take a moment to step back and evaluate the entire situation. Like going to rescue Obi-Wan. Padmé does it because no one will be able to get there in time to rescue Obi-Wan. And she evaluates the situation and takes the most logical course of action to actually successfully rescue Obi-Wan. Anakin was totally willing to do it, but he was probably, tired of getting in trouble with the Order, but hey, he was told to protect Padmé at all costs, and if that includes rescuing Obi-Wan, so be it. But overall, like I said, I don't mind a good chunk of the film. It's just that romance could have been portrayed so much better and so much more in a way that I felt, I would feel like it would understand why these two characters get together. Clone Wars did a way better job at that, as I already said. But that's pretty much what I'm going to say. Not too much about each individual plot elements as a whole, but there's many great small moments here and there that I won't get into because I'm going to be giving you guys my review for Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Let's just talk about Revenge of the Sith. And this is considered by most Star Wars fans to be the best prequel trilogy film, and I do have to concur. It shows the final days of the Republic before it finally transitions into the Galactic Empire. Though there is actually a line from Padmé where she talks about which Anakin basically, does the Republic that they serve even exist? And I kind of wish that was brought up more, they explored that more. But they kind of definitely use that though to set up that Anakin is very much, he does not think critically about politics, which I think helps contribute to why he was so easily manipulated by Darth Sidious as Chancellor Palpatine. And it does actually make me wish a bigger part of the Clone Wars show, which, mind you, is a great show, did focus on how the Republic was well before the time of this film, already the Empire in all but name only. They definitely hinted at that, but a political thriller and all that. But that's besides the point. But I do want to say, just imagine a Clone Wars political thriller in the style of Star Wars Andor. I think that'd be really, really good. But getting back to the movie itself, and I think this does a really good job at showing the final thing that broke the illusion of democracy that Palpatine had created and maintained. I think it does that very good. And also, I think does a good job at showing an already man on the precipice of being the bad guy, becoming the bad guy. The problem is I don't think Episode 2 set that up as well as they could have. And there's a few other things kind of related to how I don't think the first two films of the prequel trilogy set up Anakin becoming the bad guy, besides that, he's going to become the bad guy. He's going to become Darth Vader. Not enough of that was set up in the previous two films to make it succinct here and make it also feel like the betrayal it is. Because, one, all of us Star Wars fans knew it was coming. There was no doubt about that. We knew it was coming. But at the same time, because we all knew that it was coming, they treated it not like they... Probably how I want to say it is they treated it like, it's going to happen, therefore we're going to obviously foreshadow it. So we knew it was coming, but instead of treating it like, say, the bomb is going to explode, but you don't know when. We knew by the end of this film it was going to happen, so we had even no suspense in when it was going to happen. In some ways, it would have been kind of interesting if they had it set up so that way maybe it happened really early in the film. That would have shocked us. That would have been much more, I think, much better if they wanted to do some more twists. But that's really beside the point and minute stuff on how maybe the story could have been told differently. But like I said, I think it does a really good job overall with the story it wanted to tell and the story it had to tell based off of what was set up before. I also gotta say, I can't believe it took until the last film that he thought he was ever going to make for George Lucas, or Star Wars film for him to make, that George Lucas decided, I'm going to do a cameo in one of my own films. Took him to this film to actually do it. And he does do it, by the way. There's also some other things here and there. I've actually done a whole video on Padmé's line about this is how liberty dies with thunderous applause, which is become more and more relevant in today's world, so go check that out as well. But that's actually part of the reason why a lot of the political episodes in Star Wars, The Clone Wars I really liked, Andor, is because it does have something to say about the rise of authoritarianism, the rise of tyranny and fascism, and how, to combat it, how to deal with it, any other descriptive words we want to choose to say. So I kind of wish we got that a little bit more in the lead up to this film, like a one-off season of a TV show. I want to see that, Disney. Don't be cowards, do it. Disney's gonna be cowards, I know them. But that's a lot of stuff to say. I like this film. I think it does a good job. I do think it is the best film in the prequel trilogy. Though I also have to say as well, that I think it does, excellently show Palpatine's manipulation. Because in the previous episodes, he manipulated Padmé into doing a no-confidence vote in Chancellor Rome. Then he, via Master Media, manipulated Jar Jar into getting him emergency powers. But here, it's showing him his manipulations not just on Anakin, but the Republic as a whole and the entirety of the Senate. And that I really like. And that's something I really like seeing in the Clone Wars as well. And then we can just talk about the great sound design, great music. We can talk about that all we want about Star Wars, because that's almost always true. Star Wars has always done great with sound design and music. And I also got to say, for General Grievous being a coward, once his McGregors are taken down, he doesn't let the droid army deal with Obi-Wan Kenobi. He does it himself. So he's a coward, but he does have a little bit in him. He's not a total coward, if you will. Well, he probably thought, maybe this time I'll get him. Because that's also what the Jedi Council was thinking when they sent Obi-Wan to defeat Grievous. Maybe this time he'll get him. Well, it worked out this time for the Jedi's favor. Kind of, because Order 66. And there's a lot of ways we can look at Order 66. But the way I like looking at it is the culmination of not only Palpatine's plan, but also, I'm pretty sure, while not addressed, there's been other groups that the Republic has been targeting in some ways, and the targeting the Jedi is the last thing. There's a famous poem from pre-Nazi Germany that goes something along the lines, first they came for the communists and I did not speak out for I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists and I did not speak out for I was not a socialist. And it goes on for and then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out for I was not a Jew. And then I forget if there was a few more groups, but and then they came for me and there was no one left to speak out for me. I wonder if something like that was going on, and if we viewed Order 66 as a combination of that process of no one speaking out, that would make it even more tragic. I don't think it was. I don't think that's the intention of the creators, but I think it would be very interesting if they went that route. But suffice to say, tyranny reigns in the galaxy. Same if you have already watched the original trilogy, and you can go check out my reviews of it, so we know tyranny and fascism will be defeated. So now that we took a look at each individual of the prequel films, let's take a look at them as a collective unit. So first, I want to just address the fact that the prequels were not very well received upon their initial theatrical release, but they have come to become a very beloved part of the Star Wars fandom. Part of that can be attributed to those fans who were young children, teenagers, young adults when those films came out, are now the main bulk of the Star Wars films, especially the main bulk of Star Wars fans in the online communities. So nostalgia has played a role with it, and some of them may not be looking back at them with as critical of an eye, and some may be, and realizing, hey, these are not as bad as we saw, because that will happen as well. So I do want to address that, and I will say, the prequels, not as well done as the originals, which makes sense in some ways, but it doesn't. And I think I should elaborate on that some. They're definitely better in many ways in terms of production and all that, from a filmmaking standpoint, except for some of the CGI doesn't hold up that well, but a lot of the other stuff I think does well pretty good. But the prequels suffer, I think, in two ways. Is they had to be prequels and writing. And that's because being prequels, we know where everything's going to lead, so there's a lot of suspense taken out of it. And therefore, suspense should have been, I think, better created through the sense of, we know this is going to happen, but when is it going to happen? And that could have created a whole different type of suspense. And George Lucas is not the best at writing character dialogue. His best films are the ones where he has people working with him who can help polish up the dialogue and make it, actually be able to be spoken. Because you can write it, but you can't always speak it. I'm kind of paraphrasing Harrison Ford there. But that is something we got to acknowledge about the prequels. In terms of dialogue writing, not so great. But world building, George Lucas does a great job on world building, and he, I think, has created a very great world with the prequels. There's a reason why people love the Clone Wars. It is because it took those world building elements and expanded on them and presented them in oftentimes much more interesting ways than they were originally presented, if they were presented at all properly in the way the audience would pick up on it in the prequel trilogy. But for all that said, we can talk more about audiences' reaction to things, how things were made, but let's actually talk about the story as a whole. The story is basically Anakin's fall to the dark side, and for the most part, I think that's told pretty well. The Phantom Menace introduces us to Anakin, we learn a little bit about him. Then in episode 2, Attack of the Clones, we get to see, he doesn't have things quite all together. Then in the last film, it's like, oh crap, he doesn't have things all together, now he's a Sith Lord. And that all works pretty well, but there's a few things along the way I feel like could have been better polished, better streamlined and all that. One thing is I kind of wish Anakin was maybe a year or two older in the Phantom Menace, and maybe show more of his darker side and all that, because remember, he's presented, except for getting into one fight with Greedo, he's presented in a very positive light in the prequels, or I should say, more accurately, in the Phantom Menace. Perhaps maybe some streamlining, or maybe maybe a different interaction here or there could show that, yes, there's a darkness underneath. And then I think that would lead into what we are shown in the Attack of the Clones a lot better. Though still, please, keep that shadow where for a moment Anakin's shadow turns into Darth Vader's shadow. Keep that. That is spot on. Very well done. Show, don't tell. Remember, that's a showing thing. But you still got to tell the story. You can't just rely on background elements to show it to the audience. And with a few changes there, I think also maybe a few other streamlined changes here, like, especially in Attack of the Clones, show us maybe the most dark side, but also show that, hey, maybe if he wasn't manipulated, he definitely would be a much better person. I feel like that could have been portrayed a lot better because, again, why does Padmé get with him? He admits to basically committing a genocide. Yes, he tries to justify it basically as a crime of passion, but it's still genocide. He slaughtered the Tuscans, the Sand people. Anyhow, I could go on and on about how I'm frustrated with that, and I wish that was presented a lot better, and I did it already go on a little bit earlier, so we'll talk about some other things as well, and that's mainly because I want to convey that despite my faults with a lot of the prequels, I still very much enjoy them, but a lot of that enjoyment is because of what was accomplished in Star Wars: The Clone Wars in its theatrical release, despite limited release for that beginning movie, which was originally 4 episodes of the show, by the way, and also with the subsequent 5, then 6, then 7 seasons of the show, help flesh out a lot of the stuff in the prequels in a way that make things make more sense. And that's a fault on the prequels, not on the Clone Wars. I'll talk about the Clone Wars in a future video, but at this point I think it's time to open up the discussion. The comment section is down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching my video. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give this video a like and share. Also, consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date on all my latest content. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and as always, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are. May the Force be with you, always.